I am Pamela, 29 years old, a marketing director at a prestigious firm in Charleston, and I've always prided myself on being self-possessed and logical. My life changed completely on my wedding day when my $8,500 wedding cake was utterly destroyed, but it turned out to be the best money I ever spent. Why? Because lying in that bright red mess was my own sister Sutton, about to slip into a deep sleep. She had deliberately drugged me right at my wedding to turn me into a drunken disaster in front of my wealthy in-laws. I let her go through with her scheme, but at a much steeper cost. A subtle glass swap, a fake smile, and the outcome was the most gratifying sight of my life. My precious sister collapsing amid the crumbs of red velvet. But to grasp why my own flesh and blood wanted to sabotage my big day, we have to rewind through the preparation process. From the start, Sutton, 27, was the star of our family. She called herself an influencer, a fancy term masking her unemployment and virtual existence on social media. With 12,000 followers, she posted glamorous photos, but hid a $51,000 credit card debt from our parents. My parents, Conrad and Beal, always favored Sutton in ways that defied logic. I could bring home straight A's, scholarships, promotions, it didn't matter. Sutton could upload a selfie with a motivational quote swiped from Pinterest, and Mom would frame it. Sutton's jealousy hit its peak when I got engaged to Sterling. He was an orthopedic surgery resident at the medical university, brilliant and kind, with hands that could rebuild shattered bones, and a smile that made my heart skip. But what really drove Sutton into a tailspin wasn't his career or character, it was his last name. Sterling came from old Charleston money, the kind of family whose ancestors signed historic documents and had ships named after them, still invited to garden parties at antebellum estates. That was the world Sutton craved access to. During wedding prep, Sutton became a total nightmare. It kicked off 3 months before the ceremony. I was in my apartment reviewing vendor contracts when Sutton showed up unannounced. She strode in wearing yoga pants, pricier than most folks' monthly groceries, and toting a designer handbag I knew she couldn't afford. I've been thinking, she declared, skipping any hello. I should be your maid of honor. I looked up from my spreadsheet. I already asked Adeline, your lawyer friend. She wrinkled her nose like she'd smelled something foul. Pamela, this is a wedding with old money vibes. Do you really want someone who wears pantsuits to everything standing next to you in photos that'll hit the society pages? Adeline's my best friend. She's been there for me through thick and thin. And I'm your sister. Your only sister. What will people think if your own blood isn't your maid of honor? It'll look like we're estranged. Bad for both of us. Plus, I need this. Pamela, do you know how great this will be for my brand? A wedding at the historic Charleston Hotel with Sterling's family. I could gain thousands of followers. I should have said no right there. Held my ground. But then she called Mom. 2 hours later, both parents were at my door. Mom was already dabbing her eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief. Dad wore his signature disappointed look, the one he'd honed over decades to make me feel guilty for breathing. Pamela, sweetheart, Mom said, taking my hands. Sutton's devastated, absolutely devastated. She feels like you don't love her. That's not, I never said that. Your sister's going through a tough time right now, Dad cut in, his voice carrying that authoritative tone that ended discussions before they started. The least you can do is include her in your special day, make her feel valued. Just indulge your sister, Mom added, squeezing my hands. Don't make her sad. It's one day, Pamela. Surely you can be generous for one day. The manipulation was straight out of a playbook. They'd done this my whole life, turning Sutton's emotions into my responsibility, her happiness into my burden. Fine, I said. The word tasted like ash. You can be the maid of honor. Sutton squealed and clapped. Mom beamed. Dad nodded approvingly. When I called Adeline to break the news, she was silent for a long beat. Then, are you sure about this, Pam? No, I admitted, but it's easier than fighting them all. Easier isn't always better. She was right, of course, but I'd already made my first mistake. I didn't know then that this concession had paved the way for Sutton's most vicious plot. 2 weeks before the wedding, Sutton texted, "Need you to cover my bridesmaid dress, a bit short this month." The gown she'd picked without consulting me was a $1,800 silk number from a boutique that required appointments and served champagne during fittings. When I'd suggested more affordable options for the bridesmaids, she'd laughed it off. "You're marrying into old money, Pamela. We can't look cheap in the photos. What would Sterling's family think?" I wired the money without a fight. Looking back now, standing in that ballroom with the knowledge of what she'd plotted against me, it all clicks. Every demand, every manipulation, every time our parents forced me to swallow my needs to feed her ego, it had all built to this. Sutton didn't just want in on my wedding. She wanted to wreck it, and I nearly let her. The Charleston Historic Hotel ballroom was a picture of Southern elegance. Crystal chandeliers cast warm glows over round tables draped in ivory silk. Each centerpiece was a cascade of white roses and trailing ivy. The hardwood floors gleamed, mirroring hundreds of candles. At the far end, on its own table, stood the showstopper. The wedding cake. 6 tiers of red velvet perfection, each wrapped in ivory fondant and adorned with edible gold leaf that shimmered like stars. Handmade sugar flowers, peonies, roses, gardenias tumbled down one side in a stunning display of the baker's craft. It cost $8,500, and it was worth every cent, though not for the reasons I'd initially imagined. I sat at the head table, arranged precisely per my detailed seating chart. As a marketing director, I get the power of visuals, angles, how a photo can build a narrative or shatter a reputation. I'd spent hours planning this setup. Sterling was to my left, devastatingly handsome in his tailored tux. Dark hair, perfectly styled, his hand warm over mine on the tablecloth. To my right was Sutton, poured into a champagne-colored silk gown that probably cost more than she'd admit. Her hair was in an elaborate updo that must have taken hours. Next to Sterling was David, his best friend and best man, a cardiologist with an easy smile and the steady vibe that made him ideal for the role. I'd instructed the hotel staff on this exact arrangement. Husband on the left meant in most couple shots we'd face each other. My profile would be flattering. The lighting would hit just right. I thought I'd covered everything. In front of each of us were identical crystal champagne flutes from the hotel. No engravings, no marks. They caught the candlelight, bubbles rising in golden streams from the pricey vintage Sterling's family had gifted for the toasts. The main course had just been cleared, herb-crusted lamb with roasted veggies, plated like art. Staff moved efficiently. The soft clink of silverware and china formed a refined symphony. Conversations hummed, punctuated by laughs from Sterling's college buddies at table 7. Sterling leaned close, his breath warm on my ear. "Did you catch Uncle Richard flirting with your great-aunt Miriam? I think he's had too much wine." I turned fully left to face him, laughing, my body pivoting toward my new husband. In my peripheral vision, I caught motion to my right. Sutton's hand. It glided across the table smoothly, as if adjusting my place card, which had shifted slightly during dinner. An innocent move, even helpful, but as her palm passed over my flute, it tilted just a bit. Colorless liquid from a tiny vial in her palm dropped into my glass, dissolving instantly into the bubbles. The fizz hid it all. No color shift, no residue, nothing amiss. She pulled back quick, straightening the card with a smug little smile. She thought no one saw, but Sutton had overlooked Adeline. My best friend since law school sat at the VIP table straight across, with a clear view of the head table. While Sutton was fixated on me, on Sterling, ensuring we didn't notice her trick, she'd ignored the woman with a criminal defense attorney's eye for detail and years of studying criminal behavior. Adeline saw it all. The gliding hand, the dropping liquid, the sudden smirk. My phone, face up next to my flute, buzzed subtly, lost in the din of 200 celebrating guests. But I felt it. The screen lit with a message. I glanced down. An iMessage from Adeline, 5 words, all caps, swap glasses, she drugged it. My heart stopped, then thudded painfully in my throat, chest, fingertips. The world tilted, chandeliers too bright, sounds too loud. I froze, muscles locking, but years of client pitches, high-stakes meetings, staying cool when campaigns tanked or execs freaked, all that training kicked in. My face stayed calm, neutral, maybe a touch concerned, like any bride checking a text at her reception, but nothing more. I looked up slowly, catching Adeline's eye across the room. She gave a tiny, definitive nod. She was certain. I stared at my flute. The golden liquid sparkled innocently, bubbles streaming perfectly. It looked just like Sterling's, David's, Sutton's. But it wasn't. This wasn't typical sibling rivalry, not Sutton throwing a fit or demanding or crying to our parents. This was a calculated strike to trash my rep in front of my husband's family. She'd planned it, waited for the ideal moment. She wanted me to drink that, wanted me disoriented, sloppy, a mess, wanted Sterling's prestigious old money kin, the ones she obsessed over, to see their new daughter-in-law as a drunk unfit for their son, unable to handle booze at her own wedding. The people-pleaser in me, the one who'd spent 29 years burying my feelings to accommodate Sutton's outbursts, nodding when our parents demanded I keep her happy, died right there. I knew I had to act, had to swap the glasses, flip her plan back on her, but she was right there, less than 2 feet away, eyes hawk-like on both flutes. I sat frozen, hyper-aware, phone's weight in my hand, condensation on the poisoned glass. Sutton's quick, excited breaths beside me, anticipating her win. She was watching those glasses. I couldn't move while her gaze was on them. I needed a distraction. I sat there, heart pounding, waiting. Sterling squeezed my hand, mistaking my tension for wedding jitters. "You okay?" "Perfect," I managed. The lie was smooth, practiced. Then fate delivered the most formidable woman I'd ever known. I heard it. The click of heels on hardwood, expensive heels, the kind costing more than some car payments. The sound came from behind, from the VIP lounge, a private spot the hotel set aside for family touch-ups and quiet moments. The door opened. Mrs. Eleanor emerged. Sterling's mother was a force, in a 5'6" frame. Her Oscar de la Renta gown, navy silk with intricate beading, likely pricier than my car, fit flawlessly. Silver hair, styled elegantly, diamond earrings sparkling. She'd obviously freshened her makeup, lips a crisp classic red. She walked along the back of our row, path leading right behind the head table. Click, click, click. The heels stood out in the brief lull between courses, audible over light chatter. I felt Sutton stiffen next to me. If there was one thing my sister couldn't resist, it was a chance to impress power. And Mrs. Eleanor was the pinnacle at this wedding, the matriarch of a family with names on buildings and endowments, whose opinion could swing doors wide or slam them shut forever. Sutton's head whipped around so fast I was surprised she didn't get whiplash. She practically leaped from her chair, stepping right into Eleanor's path with golden retriever enthusiasm. "Oh, Mrs. Eleanor," Sutton's voice pitched up an octave, dripping fake sweetness. "Were you in the VIP room too? I hope the reception isn't too overwhelming. I know these events can be exhausting, especially with so many vying for your attention." She'd turned her back fully to the table, to me, to the glasses. In my mind, Adeline's text blazed. "Swap glasses." This was it. My shot. My hands went to the bases of both flutes, fingers steady. Years handling delicate pitch materials had given me precision I'd never valued till now. I didn't lift them, that'd be too obvious. Even with Sutton turned, someone might spot, a guest, server, even Sterling glancing down. Instead, I slid them. Meanwhile, my sister's voice carried behind me. "I must say," Sutton went on, not waiting for a reply, reaching to lightly touch Eleanor's sleeve, "this Oscar de la Renta was made for you. The beading, the cut, perfection. You have an incredible eye for fashion. I was just telling Pamela how elegant you look. Simply elegant." The silk tablecloth was ideal, pricey, smooth, with just enough grip to control but not resist. I applied gentle pressure to the bases, pushing my drugged glass toward Sutton's spot while pulling her clean one to mine. They glided like ice skaters, millimeters above the surface, liquid, barely rippling. Swish. I rotated the new glass slightly, turning Sutton's faint lipstick mark away from her seating side. The whole swap took 5 seconds, the exact time for Sutton to wrap her gown compliment and pivot to praising Eleanor's philanthropy at the children's hospital. No one noticed. Servers were at the ballroom's far end, guests deep in their talks. Sterling was eyeing Uncle Richard, who'd indeed cornered Aunt Miriam by the bar. But Adeline noticed. I glanced at the VIP table. She held her wine glass, eyes on me. When our gazes met, her mouth quirked in a tiny smile. She raised her glass a fraction, a toast only I saw. My ally network had clicked perfectly, and I knew Adeline wouldn't take her eyes off my sister the rest of the night. She'd watch, document, be ready. Mrs. Eleanor extricated herself with the grace of someone who dealt with social climbers for decades. How kind of you, dear. If you'll excuse me, I should return to my table. She glided off, leaving a trail of pricey perfume. Sutton bounced back into her seat, face flushed with triumph. She thought she'd scored big with my mother-in-law, a networking win worthy of an Instagram story later. She glanced at the table. The flutes sat just as before, same positions, same levels, same bubbly sparkle. Her eyes flicked over them briefly, then away. No suspicion. Why would there be? They looked identical. Her overconfidence, that certainty she'd outsmarted me, her plan foolproof, had quashed any urge to double-check. She reached for the glass in front of her now, the drugged one. Her smile was venomous, victorious. "Come on," she said, lifting the crystal toward me. "Let's toast to your happiness, Pamela." I raised my clean glass, forcing a smile loaded with subtext. Every bit of satisfaction, every delayed justice, every year of being told to yield, I poured it all in. Thank you, sister," I said softly. "To a night we'll never forget." The flutes met with a clear, pure chime ringing across our table section. Clink. Sutton brought it to her lips and drank deep, eyes locked on mine over the rim. She thought she was witnessing her plot unfold, my downfall begin. I sipped my clean champagne and watched her swallow her own doom. The colorless liquid, melatonin, whatever dose she'd prepped for me, slid down with the vintage bubbly. She set her glass down with a satisfied sigh. Still smiling, I smiled back and waited. After the toast, I made my play. I had to sell it, make Sutton believe her scheme was working as intended, so I went quiet. Turned slightly from the table talk, let my smile fade to something subdued. When Sterling asked about dessert timing, I replied softly, vaguely. When David tried pulling me into a joke about awful med school wedding speeches, I managed a weak laugh. Sutton picked up on it instantly. I felt her eyes on me, her lean in as she scrutinized for drug signs. I gave her what she craved, a bride turning quieter, detached, unfocused. The corner of her mouth twitched up. She thought it was kicking in, thought I was starting to feel the melatonin, that in minutes I'd be stumbling, slurring, a spectacle before 200 guests and Sterling's whole family. She leaned back, buzzing with excitement, confidence swelling, but Sutton didn't realize, her narcissism blinded her, that the drugs were in her system now, absorbing into her bloodstream, heading for her brain. The MC's voice came over the speakers, smooth and pro. "Ladies and gentlemen, we now invite the best man to say a few words." The ballroom hushed, chats trailing off as guests turned to the small stage near the cake table. David stood, buttoning his jacket with an easy grin. I checked the time. The evening was on schedule, just past 8. He headed to the mic and for the next minutes had the room in stitches. Tales of Sterling's awful cooking in their residency apartment, the time he wore mismatched shoes to a formal hospital talk, the moment David knew Sterling was serious about me because he started doing laundry instead of buying new clothes. The timing was spot on. David's speech created a buffer, attention elsewhere, where subtle changes in Sutton's body went unseen in the dim ballroom. I watched her sidelong. She was still smiling, still this supportive maid of honor, but I saw it, the slight shift in her seat, her hand briefly touching her temple, the small crease between her brows. The melatonin was hitting. Liquid form acts faster than pills, quick absorption. Sutton would feel it now, a subtle heaviness in limbs, fuzziness in thoughts, but she'd chalk it up to speech nerves or the champagne hitting hard. She'd never suspect the truth. David rapped to applause and returned, clapping Sterling's shoulder. Sterling stood for a hug, the two sharing a moment that set photographers flashing. The MC returned. "Thank you, David. And now we'd love to hear from the maid of honor." The moment was here. Sutton rose. I watched closely, memorizing, the brief, steadying hand on the table, the pause before stepping from her chair like gathering coordination, the forced brightness not reaching her eyes. She thought it was anxiety, thought it was public speaking jitters, but I knew better. The drugs were gripping, creating that lightheaded disconnect, limbs heavy. In 10 minutes, she'd fight to stay awake, but now she had enough clarity, enough diluted hubris to think she was in charge. She walked to the stage area, steps maybe a tad slower but steady enough, heading straight for the spot she'd likely planned for days, right by the cake tower. Of course, the $8,500 red velvet masterpiece with gold leaf and sugar flowers would be prime backdrop for her later posts. The pricey cake signaled wealth, status, old money ties, proof she'd arrived in that world. She positioned as close as possible, probably too close for catering staff. Left hand held a fresh wine glass. Right took the wireless mic from the MC. That mic, beautiful, betraying wireless device broadcasting every word through the upscale sound system Sterling's family splurged on. Sutton didn't consider what might happen if she lost word control, if the drugs made her loose-lipped and honest. She just smiled at the crowd and started. "Good evening, everyone." Her voice amplified perfectly. "For those who don't know me, I'm Sutton, Pamela's sister and maid of honor." Words still clear, controlled, but I saw the effort, her overly still stance like fighting sway. "I've known Pamela my whole life, obviously. And I have to say," she paused for effect, playing the audience, "it's been quite a journey watching her find someone worthy." Polite laughs from guests. Pamela's always been the responsible one, the organized one, with perfect plans and a perfect career. An edge crept in, sharp under the sugary tone. And now she has the perfect husband from the perfect family. I sat below, hand finding Sterling, squeezing tight. He squeezed back. He had no clue what was coming. No one did. Sutton raised her wineglass slightly, liquid catching light. "So here's to Pamela," she said, smile wide, fake, poisonous. "To my perfect sister and her perfect life." The crowd murmured approval, glasses lifting. But I sat watching, waiting for the melatonin to hit full force, for karma to strike, for my sister to fall. The applause for my speech still echoed when Sutton raised her wineglass high. That rehearsed smile stretched her face. She delivered flawlessly, loving sister, gracious bridesmaid, family unity incarnate. But I knew better. Always had. "To my sister and her new husband," she announced, voice with the theatrical flair honed for Instagram reels. "May your marriage be everything mine will be someday." The crowd murmured assent. Sterling's hand found mine under the table, fingers warm and steady. I watched Sutton bring the crystal to her lips, my original glass, the one she'd doctored, and take a long, triumphant sip. The change wasn't instant. She lowered it, still smiling, still in role. But then I saw it. The slight wobble, her free hand reaching for the podium like the floor had shifted. "Thank you all for, Her words slurred at the edges. She blinked rapidly, eyelids drooping. The flute trembled in her grip. Adeline leaned close, whispering, "How much did she use?" "I don't know," I murmured, but judging by the speed, way more than recommended. She swayed visibly now, knuckles white on the mic stand. The ballroom went silent. 300 guests watching my sister's facade crumble live. "Why?" Her voice cracked over speakers, confused, scared. "Why is the ceiling spinning?" The wineglass slipped first. It tumbled in slow-mo, crystal flashing before shattering on stage. The sound was sharp, final, like a gunshot in the hush. Then Sutton's legs buckled fully. She pitched forward, right hand still death-gripping the mic, as if it could anchor her to awareness. Her body fell with dead-weight gravity. No self-catch, no instincts left in her doped system. The impact was disastrous. Boom. 6 tiers of red velvet, $8,500 artisan perfection, each layer with gold details and delicate flowers, exploded on contact. Sutton's face hit first, then torso, her $1,800 dress plunging into ruin like a diver into water. But instead of water, buttercream crumbs, deep crimson red velvet interiors. The sight was horrific. White cream mixing with red cake looked eerily like a crime scene. My sister lay still in the wreckage, platinum hair matted with frosting. Her ivory gown stained beyond salvage. It appeared she'd been violently taken down before 300 witnesses. Mom's scream pierced the air. "Sudden!" But Sterling was already in motion. Doctor training activated before anyone processed. He was on stage in seconds, tux forgotten as he knelt by the cake mess. "Someone kill the music," he commanded, voice calm but ironclad. The jazz quartet silenced instantly. Sterling worked fast, hands precise. He rolled her onto her side firmly to clear airways, wiping thick buttercream from nose and mouth. I watched my husband check her neck pulse, lift eyelids for pupils, face darkening with each check. The room held its breath. David froze at the head table. Eleanor had hand to heart. Dad pushed through the crowd, face ashen. The rolls seemed to jolt Sutton. Her hands still clutched the mic, device dragging across her chin as Sterling positioned. In delirium, her eyes fluttered open, unfocused. "No?" The word came broken, barely audible, but the mic near her lips caught it perfectly. Her voice echoed distorted and weak over speakers. "Wrong glass. The drugged glass." The confession hung like smoke. Time froze. Every person heard it, slurred, muddled, but clear. Wrong glass. Drugged glass. The implication hit hard. Sterling's hands stilled. He looked up slowly from Sutton's form to where my parents stood at stage edge. His expression was icy, colder than I'd seen. "She's not stroking," he said, words clinical. "This is synergistic toxicity. Alcohol amplifying a CNS depressant. Classic sedative overdose symptoms." Mom choked. "What? No, that's not—" She wouldn't. Sterling pulled his phone, dialing 911, briefing dispatch in med terms before hanging. Dad found his voice. "This is absurd. Sutton would never. Must be a mistake." Sterling stood, towering over them. His look could freeze flames. "You two go to the hospital with her. I won't call police tonight." He paused, danger flashing in his eyes. "But if anything else happens, even one more incident, I can't promise that courtesy." The threat landed. Dad, who'd bulldozed my life with opinions and demands, actually stepped back. He opened his mouth, then shut it, silenced by Sterling's command. The ambulance arrived minutes later, downtown Perk. Paramedics loaded Sutton on a gurney, face still smeared with frosting and crumbs, dress irreparable. Mom climbed in wordlessly, face twisted in martyred pain. Dad lingered at the ballroom door, glancing back at me with something unreadable. Accusation, guilt, fear. I met his stare steadily, refusing to yield comfort through submission. Then he was gone. Ambulance pulling into the Charleston night. The ballroom was pandemonium. Guests murmuring in shocked groups, staff uncertain, ruined cake a crimson monument to the disaster. I stood at the head table, Sterling's hand in mine, an unexpected wave washing over me. Relief, pure, unadulterated relief. Adeline appeared beside me, phone like a trophy. "I recorded everything," she announced, her criminal lawyer instincts razor sharp. The fall and confession, audio's crystal. She tapped, and Sutton's doped voice replayed. Wrong glass. The drugged glass. Nearby guests heard. Whispers grew. I watched truth ripple through the crowd like a pebble in still water. My sister, the golden child, beloved youngest, had just confessed to attempted poisoning before 300 witnesses. The hunter had become the hunted. Eleanor approached, her Oscar de la Renta still pristine amid chaos. She eyed the wrecked cake, then me, expression inscrutable. "Well," she said at last, dry amusement in her tone, "this is certainly the most memorable wedding I've attended." The hotel manager materialized, wringing hands. "Mrs. Ashford, I'm so terribly sorry. Should we end the reception given the circumstances?" I looked at the mess. Red velvet crumbs scattered like violence evidence, white frosting smeared. The 6-tier beauty reduced to rubble, $8,500 of artistry gone, and all I felt was lightness. I turned to Sterling, his blue eyes searched mine, concerned but not pitying. "How are you?" he asked quietly. "This is the first time I've seen you breathe easy since we got engaged," he said before I could reply. He was right. For months, I'd tiptoed around family expectations, trying to avert this exact scene. I'd paid for Sutton's dress, included her in details, bent backward for peace, and she'd tried to drug me anyway. But now, the monster was banished. I looked at the manager and smiled genuinely, not the practiced one I'd worn all night. "Clean it up," Bring out more wine and whatever desserts the kitchen has. The night's just starting. The manager blinked. You want to continue? This is my wedding reception, I said firmly, and I'm celebrating with the people who actually care about me. Something shifted in the room. Obligation guests, parents' friends, society types there for show, slipped out quietly, but those who stayed were ours, Sterling's med colleagues, my work pals, Adeline and David, Eleanor, family who'd truly gotten to know us. The jazz started up. Hotel trays came with chocolate tortes and lemon tarts. Someone popped more champagne. Without my family's judgment looming, the reception became real. I danced with Sterling under chandeliers, his arms around my waist, feeling years of tension finally release. No regrets? Sterling asked, his voice low as we swayed to the music. None, I murmured against his hair, and I meant it with every fiber of my being. Adeline caught my eye from across the dance floor, raising her champagne flute in a silent toast. She'd been warning me about my family's toxicity for years, pointing out the patterns of favoritism and manipulation that I'd been too close to see clearly. Tonight, in the most explosive way imaginable, she'd been vindicated. As the night wore on, the reception evolved into something magical, unburdened by the shadows of my past. Guests shared genuine stories, laughter echoed without the undercurrent of judgment, and for the first time, I felt like the center of a celebration that was truly about us, Sterling and me, building a future free from the chains of obligation. The next morning, sunlight filtered through the hotel suite's windows, casting a golden haze over the rumpled sheets. My phone buzzed on the nightstand, pulling me from a deep, dreamless sleep, the first I'd had in months. It was a text from Mom. How could you let this happen? Sutton only did it because she felt left out. She felt pressured. Seeing you enter such a wealthy family, she made a mistake. You need to forgive her. Family is family. I read it twice, feeling the familiar guilt try to worm its way back in, like an old habit I couldn't quite shake. The old Pamela, the one who'd spent 29 years scrambling for scraps of parental approval, apologizing for things that weren't her fault, twisting herself into knots to keep the peace, would have responded immediately, would have typed out an apology, offered to pay Sutton's hospital bill, promised to smooth things over with Sterling's family. But that version of me had been buried under the ruins of that cake, smothered in red velvet and finality. I deleted the message without a reply. Then, with a steady hand, I blocked her number. Sterling watched from the bed, propped on one elbow, his expression soft but understanding. He didn't ask questions. He didn't need to. He'd seen the dynamics up close now, witnessed the fallout of decades of imbalance. You okay? He said simply. Yeah, I replied, and for once it was the unvarnished truth. I really am. Next, I blocked Dad's number, then Sutton's. One by one, I severed the digital ties that had kept me tethered to their dysfunction. No more late-night wire transfers to bail Sutton out of her latest debt spiral. No more guilt-laced phone calls where Dad lectured me on family duty. No more playing the role of the eternal scapegoat, the daughter who could never quite measure up because the bar was always rigged in Sutton's favor. Freedom tasted like the salty Charleston morning air wafting through the open window, crisp, invigorating, full of possibility. In the weeks that followed, rumors swirled through Charleston's tight-knit social circles. Whispers about the cake incident at the Ashford wedding made the rounds at garden parties and charity luncheons, the kind Sutton had so desperately wanted to infiltrate. I heard snippets from mutual acquaintances, how Sutton's episode was being spun as a tragic accident by my parents, a mix of too much champagne and wedding stress. But Adeline's recording, the crystal clear audio of Sutton's slurred confession, had already circulated among key players. Sterling's family, with their old money discretion, handled it quietly but firmly. No more invitations for my parents to family events. No bridges rebuilt without serious accountability. Eleanor, in particular, became an unexpected ally. Over tea at her historic estate a month later, she confided, "I've seen families like yours before, dear. The favored child who devours everything in their path. You did what you had to do to protect your future." Her words were a balm, validation from someone who'd navigated far more treacherous social waters than I ever would. Sutton, meanwhile, faced the consequences she'd engineered for herself. The hospital tests confirmed high levels of melatonin mixed with alcohol, enough to knock out someone twice her size, according to Sterling's colleagues. She spent a night in observation, then slunk back to our parents' house, her influencer brand in tatters. Her followers dropped by the thousands after blurry photos from the reception leaked online. The maid of honor face planting into a luxury cake, looking like a victim in a slasher film. Hashtags like Ojar's wedding fail and Schwadage cake catastrophe trended locally, with anonymous comments speculating about family drama and sabotage. Sutton tried damage control with a tearful Instagram live, blaming exhaustion and a bad reaction to medication, but the internet sleuths weren't buying it. Her debt collectors, sensing weakness, ramped up their calls. Last I heard, through a distant cousin who couldn't resist sharing, she'd taken a part-time job at a boutique, hawking the same overpriced clothes she'd once flaunted as her own. 1 year later, life had transformed in ways I could never have predicted. Sterling and I drove to a prenatal checkup at Charleston Medical University, the same hospital where he'd completed his residency. I was 8 months along, my belly a firm, rounded swell under a simple sundress, a far cry from the elaborate gowns of our wedding day. The ultrasound technician glided the wand over my skin, the room filled with the rhythmic whoosh of a tiny heartbeat. "Everything looks perfect," she said, smiling at the screen. "Your baby girl is healthy and right on track." A daughter. Sterling's hand tightened around mine, his eyes glistening with emotion we'd both been holding back. We'd spent months discussing this, how we'd parent differently, breaking the cycles that had scarred my childhood. No favoritism, no golden child elevated at the expense of others. "Every child equal," Sterling whispered, echoing our vow, "always." The drive home wound through Charleston's historic district, past antebellum homes draped in Spanish moss, their wrought iron gates guarding secrets older than my family's dysfunction. My phone, new number, curated contacts, stayed silent in my purse. Mom had tried reaching out through intermediaries, leaving voicemails about making amends and being part of her grandchild's life. Dad sent a formal letter via mail, full of platitudes about forgiveness and blood ties. I hadn't responded to any of it. Some wounds heal best when left to scar over, and some bridges are better as ashes, their smoke a reminder of what not to rebuild. Sterling and I had created our own family now, one rooted in mutual respect, open communication, and unwavering support. Our home was a cozy Victorian we'd renovated together, filled with light and laughter, far from the suffocating expectations of my past. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, I sat on our back porch with my laptop, the ocean breeze carrying hints of salt and jasmine. I'd started documenting my story anonymously on an online forum, a space for survivors of toxic families to share and seek advice. The wedding disaster had been too cinematic to keep bottled up, and writing it out had been therapeutic, a way to process the chaos and claim my narrative. "Strong opinions needed," I typed into the post. "My family still won't leave me alone, even after everything. I want outside perspectives on a few things." Question 1. Was I too harsh for swapping the glasses? Mom claims a good sister would have just poured out the drink instead of letting Sutton face the consequences. But after years of her manipulations, didn't she deserve to taste her own medicine? Question 2. Sutton destroyed an $8,500 cake in her fall. Should I pursue her in small claims court for reimbursement or chalk it up as the cost of a priceless life lesson? Question 3. Do you agree it's better to lose $8,500 and rid yourself of toxic people than preserve a facade of a perfect wedding? The comments poured in, supportive, outraged, empathetic. Strangers validated what I'd known deep down. Boundaries aren't cruelty. They're survival. As I hit post and closed the laptop, Sterling called from the kitchen where he was preparing dinner, grilled shrimp with fresh herbs from our garden, jazz music playing softly in the background. Through the window, I watched him move with easy grace, our shared life unfolding in simple, beautiful moments. My daughter kicked, a firm, insistent flutter against my ribs, as if affirming her place in this new world. I pressed a hand to the spot, feeling the miracle of fresh starts, of breaking free. The wedding cake was gone, the bridesmaid dress ruined, my old family ties irreparably severed, and in their place, peace. Joy, a future untainted by jealousy or control. The monster had been slain, the cage door flung wide open. I'd paid $500 for that freedom, and it was the bargain of a lifetime.